Let's talk about rope. Welcome to my channel. I focus on tabletop role-playing games, video games, and science fiction. In the description below, you're going to see a couple of links to some videos and some other links about rope, about making rope. Lindy Beige made 2 videos about ropes, one about going out and having some made, and about how Hollywood was really bad with dealing with rope because people were always cutting it. And he talks about the real challenge of making rope, and some of the other links down in the description talk about how difficult rope making actually was. Today it's all automated, we don't think much about it, there are machines that do this. But in the ancient world, medieval world, rope making was a skill. It was a trade that you had to learn, and there were secrets to the trade. That you didn't know how things were actually woven. You had to be an apprentice, and there were trade secrets about what was going on. Each piece of rope was handmade, so that they were not all alike. You had to grow the whatever you were making the rope out of. Hemp was a New World invention, and actually the one link down below, he talks about how rope making changed after the Europeans came to North America, because up to that point in time, England had a bunch of people who made rope, and it was all trade secret. And then England passed some laws about tariffs and our importing into the United States, that we had to pay, or the colonies at that time, we had to pay extra money for that. So then the Americans decided, well, we didn't want to pay the English for that, so they reverse engineered and created their own kinds of rope. But that was up to that point in time, it had all been very trade secret, how you made ropes. It looks so simple, but there's a bit of technology in how it's woven, the tools that were used to create it, and how to make long ropes and so on. So each rope in your world, if you're running a Dungeons and Dragons campaign or something set in that period of time, each rope had to be handmade. That means you have to grow what your source of fibers are. You had to grow that, you had to harvest that, you had to beat out the fibers, then you had to make cord, and then you had to spin it into cord, and then from cord you had to go through the weaving of the rope. And that's a whole technology in of itself. But the interesting thing that always interests me is handmade things. We live in a world today where everything is mass produced. The only thing you possibly will see that is unique is bakeries. That's about the only real interaction we have with handmade stuff, where it's made completely by hand. I mean, no, they don't grow their own wheat and grind it into flour, but you do have people mixing it up and so on. One of the things that my mother did when she was older, and she came up with this idea of making Cabbage Patch dolls. Now, those of you who've seen the plastic Cabbage Patch dolls, before the plastic ones were the cloth ones. That's why they came out and became extremely popular, because they were made with nylon and stuffing, and my mother started making Cabbage Patch dolls, and she could pick up one and immediately know if it was hers, because there were things that she did about hers that were her. I remember her saying they were her secrets, that about how she made that, and she could recognize one of the dolls she made immediately. And because she could see how she had made it. So a rope maker is going to know if he made that rope or not, because he's going to recognize all the effort that went into it. It's not just a few hours to make a rope. It's many, many hours of work to make a 50-foot of rope, or whatever your length of rope is that you have to make. and you have to have the equipment and so on. There was the discussion about at one point in time, the longest building in the world was this building in England that was built to make the ropes for the British sailing vessels, because they wanted one rope that was, as you know, I can't remember, it was 1,000 feet long, and so they had to build this building that was longer than that, because you have to weave it, you have to weave it in one long strand, so you don't you can't break it up, and you have to have it in one long strand. And they had this tremendously long building. It's in the picture of one of the descriptions I have down in the description of that I've down below. And so you have people making rope. So what does this mean is that people would, if I was a rope maker, to make my rope distinctive, and it doesn't affect anything, doesn't affect the strength, if you take some of the fibers that you're having and dye them, just a few strands. And it's like if you pick up an American dollar bill, and you'll know that there are various colored threads throughout that. That's the thing about the paper, is the paper is very special with a certain rag content, and it's got various colored fibers, and you can look for them to see it. That's one of the signs you can check to see if it's fake or not. But a rope maker could easily put just a handful of colored strands, and he would know by looking, or she would know by looking at the rope, whether they made it or not. So each rope becomes unique because it's made by hand, and each place that makes the rope would do it their own unique way. And the tradesman would teaches apprentices how to make the rope. They would have to pay to become an apprentice, and they would work at slave wages basically for a long time to learn the trade. Now they've got a trade for the rest of their life about making rope. So rope is not just this thing. Today we walk into, you know, your big box store or whatever. You'd go into Sam's Club or Lowe's or Home Depot, and you would sit, if you're looking for rope, there's a section, and there's all these different ropes that are made by different manufacturers, but there's stacks and stacks of them, all basically identical. That's not what you're going to find in your ancient world. Every rope is going to be unique, and it's going to be made by hand by one person or one team is making that rope. And if you watch some of the videos about how challenging it is and how much work it is to make that rope, you start to appreciate something as simple as rope. So if your party finds some rope, it's an interesting clue. You can take it to another rope maker, and they can tell you, oh, that's not my rope, but I have an idea whose it is. Just like people would know who their competitors were. You would be able to recognize their work, because it's all unique. An artist, an oil painter artist, can generally recognize, this is what I understand, I'm not into oil painting, but it's that they can generally recognize the work of somebody else if they're contemporary, or maybe they're not. They could tell you a little bit about this, but you could recognize somebody could tell you the rope, maybe what kind of fibers were in it, where that probably came from, and how it, you know, how tight it was made, or the strength of it. All of those things could come from the rope, so that there's a whole history wrapped up in making that rope. So you can add this to your campaign. Just the rope is just the first thing. You're going to find this with mugs, but I've already talked about mugs and flagons and things like that. But your rope is something that we don't think about, that every piece of rope is probably unique, and they're probably slightly different lengths. They're going to be within a few inches. They're not all going to be 50 feet of rope. They're going to be, some is going to be 49 feet. They will be close to standardized when they make that. And 50 feet of rope is actually kind of a long rope if you take a look at it. But somebody's going to they're not going to cut the rope. Actually, you ought to see Lindy Beige's video talking about cutting rope. No one would cut rope. It's way too valuable to cut. That's something that you would not want to do, because it's a way too difficult to make, and you just don't cut rope. You would untie rope. That's why you have all these complicated knots that people developed over the years and for various techniques. for various uses. So tell me what you think about this video. Are you going to make people recognize that everything is handmade in your world? Have you done anything like this? I'd like to hear your comments. Thank you for watching my video. I look forward to learning what you think about this video. Let me know in the comments below. If you like the video, press the thumbs up button. You can subscribe by clicking the link in the lower left. If you are interested, there are links to more content.